Laurel stood by the office coffee machine, the familiar hum of the Toronto tech firm's morning bustle wrapping around her like a worn blanket. She stirred almond milk into her cup, her hands moving on autopilot after 12 years of this routine. The glass door swung open with a sharp thud, and in strode Enzo, the new CEO and son of the company's founder, Matteo Ricci. His tailored suit hugged his frame, his dark eyes cutting through the room. No nod, no smile, just a stare that pinned her like a specimen under glass. "Laurel," he said, voice clipped and cold as winter steel. "My office. Now." It wasn't a request, it was a command, barked with the arrogance of someone who'd never had to earn his place. Laurel's stomach tightened, a flicker of unease sparking beneath her calm exterior. She set her cup down, the coffee rippling slightly, and followed him, her heels clicking against the polished hardwood. She'd built the product development team from nothing, launched software that tripled the company's revenue, Nexus, her crowning achievement, and mentored half the staff buzzing outside his door. Matteo had hired her 12 years ago after a single coffee meeting, his gruff voice saying, "You've got fire, kid!" Enzo, though? He'd inherited the keys to the kingdom and seemed intent on torching it. He didn't sit, just stood behind his desk, flipping through a tablet like he was bored. "You're fired," he said, voice flat, emotionless. "We're streamlining." Dead weight like he doesn't fit. Laurel blinked, the words slamming into her chest like a physical blow. Her mind scrambled to process it. "Excuse me," she managed, her voice steady despite the shock. "You heard me," he replied, still not looking up, as if she were a minor annoyance, a fly to swat. "Pack your stuff. You're done." Effective immediately. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat echoing in her ears. 12 years, late nights coding until dawn, weekends sacrificed, tears shed in the bathroom after her sister's death, all poured into this company. She'd given more to this place than to her own family, her own life. And now this smug, spoiled 30-something dismissed her like a temp who'd spilled coffee on the printer. She wanted to scream, to rattle off every project she'd saved, every dollar she'd earned them. Instead, she smiled, a calm, deliberate curve of her lips. "Got it, Enzo," she said, her tone almost too polite. "Good luck." She turned on her heel and walked out, head high, though her knees trembled beneath her skirt. Colleagues glanced up from their desks, Sophia from QA, Luca from Dev, sensing the shift in the air. A few started to rise, questions in their eyes, but she gave a subtle shake of her head. "Don't make this harder." She packed her desk in silence. A photo of her sister, a chipped mug, a stack of notebooks filled with Nexus sketches. Each item felt heavier than the last. In her car, the silence crashed in. Memories flooded her. 12 years of grit, of proving herself in a male-dominated field, of Matteo's rare nods of approval. Why? Question gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. Something was off. The timing, right before Nexus's launch, a project she'd breathed life into, made no sense. Had Enzo even glanced at her work? Her contract? That night, she barely slept, the question looping in her mind. By morning, her phone buzzed, Matteo's number. Her heart leapt. "Laurel," he rasped, voice thick with shock and something else, anger. "Why'd you leave? What the hell happened?" "Your son fired me," she said, keeping her tone even despite the lump in her throat. "Called me dead weight." Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then a sharp inhale. "He what? Did he read your contract?" Laurel frowned, confusion cutting through her fatigue. "What do you mean?" "Nexus," Matteo growled, his voice rising. "You're the only one authorized to finalize it, legally, practically. He can't launch without you." Her breath caught, realization dawning like a slow sunrise. Enzo didn't know. He'd swung the axe blind, and it was about to boomerang. A slow grin spread across her face, Not triumph yet, but power, pure and unshakable. He's in trouble, isn't he? Damn right, Matteo said, his words clipped with fury. Stay put. I'm fixing this. He hung up, and Laurel leaned back on her couch, staring at her cold coffee. Enzo had misfired, and the recoil was coming fast. She wasn't just hurt anymore, she was in control. And she'd make sure he felt every inch of that mistake. Laurel woke to her phone buzzing like a trapped hornet, missed calls stacking up from Enzo, HR, the receptionist, even a junior dev she barely knew. She ignored them all, letting the voicemail icon blink accusingly. 10:15, she finally tapped it, and Enzo's voice crackled through, strained and brittle. Laurel, hey. Yesterday was a mix-up. We need you back. Like now. Call me. No apology, just desperation dressed up as casual. She smirked, sipping her tea, letting the warmth seep into her hands. 10:30, Sophia called, her voice a hushed rush. You won't believe this, Laurel. Matteo stormed into the office this morning, full hurricane mode. Dragged Enzo into the boardroom and tore him apart in front of everyone. Asked one question. Did you read her contract? Enzo tried to bluster, something about new direction, optimizing roles, but Matteo wasn't having it. He waved the Nexus clause like a damn flag. Enzo went white as a ghost. Laurel's pulse quickened, a thrill sparking in her chest. What did Matteo say? He said, if Nexus tanks, you're out. Blank. Everyone's freaking out. The launch is Friday. They're scrambling, and Enzo's pacing like a caged dog. Laurel exhaled, leaning against her kitchen counter. Nexus was her baby. 2 years of coding marathons, sleepless nights tweaking algorithms, endless meetings with investors like Javier, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. She'd insisted on that clause after a past project got hijacked by a careless exec. It was her shield, her signature etched in legalese. Only she could sign off on the final release. Now it was her sword, and Enzo had no idea he'd handed it to her. By noon, Matteo texted, Laurel, I'm sorry. Come in. We'll talk privately. She didn't rush. She dressed deliberately, crisp blazer, tailored trousers, heels that clicked with purpose, and drove to the office, parking in the visitor lot. She walked through the main lobby, not the staff entrance, her chin up. Heads turned. Gia at reception froze mid-sentence. A junior dev dropped his coffee mug, and whispers rippled like wind through the cubicles. She wasn't just back, she was a statement. Gia stammered, Ms. Ricci's waiting. Mr. Ricci, I mean. Laurel nodded, following her down the hall. The air felt charged, like the building itself knew a reckoning was coming. Matteo stood at his office door, face etched with exhaustion and regret. Laurel, thank you for coming, he said, stepping aside. I screwed up, giving Enzo free rein. He's a kid playing boss, doesn't know what he's doing. He fired me like I was nothing, she said, her voice steady but edged with steel. After 12 years of building this place. I know, Matteo sighed, sinking into his chair. He didn't read a damn thing, not your contract, not Nexus's terms. It's all on you, legally and practically. I need you back. I'll consider it, she said, crossing her arms. But I want guarantees in writing. Full control over Nexus, no meddling from Enzo. And I want this fixed, not just patched. Anything, he nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a flicker of the old trust they'd shared. Name your terms. She left him hanging, stepping out to the open floor. Enzo paced by the break room, his tie loose, eyes darting to her as she emerged. She met his gaze, unflinching, and walked past, her heels a steady drumbeat. His rein was cracking. She could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his hands twitched. He'd underestimated her, and now the panic was setting in. She wasn't just a fired employee anymore. She was the key he'd thrown away, and he was scrambling to find it before the lock turned against him. Laurel returned the next morning, a revised contract in her bag, inked with full Nexus control, a no-interference clause against Enzo, and a raise she hadn't even asked for. Matteo signed it without a blink, his pen scratching the paper like a confession. "You're saving us," he said, voice heavy with relief. She nodded, but her eyes were fixed on a bigger prize: accountability. She wasn't here to play savior. She was here to make Enzo face the mess he'd made. The Nexus launch loomed, 3 days away, and the office buzzed with a nervous energy that crackled in the air. Laurel strode into the boardroom at 10 a.m., meeting Javier, the lead investor from Madrid. His handshake was firm, his Spanish accent warm as he greeted her. "Laurel, good to see you. Heard there was some drama. Everything sorted?" "Nothing I can't handle," she smiled, sliding him the finalized docs, English and Spanish versions, a touch she'd added years ago to seal his trust. He grinned, flipping through them, his sharp eyes softening. "You never miss a detail." The meeting flowed like clockwork. Terms locked, signatures inked by 3 p.m. Nexus was safe, her legacy intact. Beside the glass walls, Enzo hovered like a vulture, his face a storm of fury and humiliation. Matteo had sidelined him. No meetings, no calls, and words spread fast through the office grapevine. Sophia caught her by the printer later, whispering, "He's livid, blames you for embarrassing him in front of Javier. Says you're stealing his thunder." "He embarrassed himself," Laurel replied, unfazed, adjusting a stack of reports. "Thunder's earned, not handed." But she felt his glare across the room, a heat that prickled her skin. Enzo wasn't done. He was wounded, and wounded animals don't slink away quietly, they bite. That night, an email she'd sent to Javier bounced back, marked undeliverable. Odd. She double-checked, it was fine on her end. Then Luca, a junior dev with a knack for spotting trouble, texted, "Heads up, someone's messing with your files. Prototype backups look weird." Laurel's gut twisted. She logged in remotely. Her Nexus backups were scrambled, timestamps jumbled, keynotes missing. Not a glitch. Sabotage. She called IT, voice low. "Trace it now." By morning, they had a lead, a shared terminal near Enzo's office, accessed during his assistant's lunch break. No hard proof yet, but the pattern was glaring. He couldn't fire her again, Matteo's leash was too tight, so he'd tarnish her instead, chip away at her credibility until she cracked. Laurel didn't confront him. She documented everything, screenshots of the altered files, server logs, timestamps stamped with quiet precision. Patience was her weapon now, sharper than any outburst. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the city skyline through her apartment window. Enzo thought he was clever, a puppet master pulling strings in the dark. He had no idea how deep she'd dig, how long she'd wait. She'd spent 12 years building this company's backbone. She knew its veins better than he ever would. Let him scheme. She'd be ready when the threads unraveled. Laurel spent the next day rebuilding her scrambled files, her focus razor-sharp as she pieced Nexus back together. She didn't tell Matteo, not yet. Suspicion wasn't enough. She needed proof, something concrete to nail Enzo to the wall. By noon, IT's report landed in her inbox. The terminal's login traced to Carla, Enzo's assistant, but the activity spiked during her lunch break, 12:17 p.m. when she was at the deli downstairs. Someone else had slipped in, used her credentials. Laurel's eyes narrowed. Enzo. She kept quiet, watching the office like a hawk. The glitches piled up, misfiled reports with her name on them, approvals delayed without reason, a client call from Javier asking about a revised timeline she'd never sent. She traced it, another fake email from her account sent from the same terminal. This wasn't sloppy, it was surgical, a calculated smear campaign. Enzo wasn't just mad. He was desperate to paint her as the weak link. That afternoon, she overheard him in the hall, his voice low but smug, dripping with venom. "She's slipping," he told Dario, a VP with a corner office and a penchant for golf. "Nexus won't save her forever, too many mistakes lately." Dario murmured something neutral, but Laurel's blood boiled. She stayed calm, slipping into a nearby cubicle, her notebook in hand, logging every word, time, date, tone. Evidence was her shield now. She met Sophia after hours in the parking lot, the sky bruising purple with dusk. "He's framing me," Laurel said, showing her the screenshots, altered files, fake emails, the terminal logs. "He wants me out, quiet-like, so no one questions his comeback." Sophia paled, clutching her bag. "He's unhinged, Laurel. This isn't just petty, it's dangerous." "What's your move?" "Expose him," she said, her voice steady as stone. "But I need more. Something he can't dodge." She got it the next morning. Luca flagged a deleted log. Someone had accessed her Nexus prototype at 2 a.m., tweaking code to crash it on launch day. IT recovered the IP, Enzo's personal laptop, linked through the company VPN. Checkmate. Laurel stared at the screen, her heart pounding, not with fear but with cold, clear purpose. He'd crossed a line from sabotage to sabotage of the company itself. She marched to Matteo's office, evidence stacked in a folder like a loaded gun. "Your son's sabotaging me," she said, laying it out, emails, logs, the tampered code. "He's risking Nexus to bury me. This isn't personal anymore, it's the company." Matteo's face darkened as he scrolled through the files, his jaw tightening with each click. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, slamming the folder shut. "I thought he'd stop after the firing stunt." "He didn't," she said, arms crossed. "He's a liability to me, to Nexus, to everything you built." Matteo rubbed his temples, his voice low and ragged. "I'll handle it. Audit starts tomorrow, full sweep." "He's done." Laurel nodded, but unease coiled in her gut. Matteo's fury was real, but Enzo wouldn't go quietly. He never had. She left the office, the weight of her evidence lightening her steps, but her mind raced. She'd unmasked him, but the game wasn't over. Enzo was a cornered animal now, and she'd seen what desperation could do. She'd be ready, notebook in hand, eyes wide open. The audit kicked off at 8 a.m., sharp and unceremonious. A team of 3, led by Irina, a stern woman with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense glare, took over a conference room on the 5th floor. Files piled up on tables, screens glowed with lines of data, and a whiteboard stood ready to map the mess. Laurel handed over her evidence folder, her voice steady as she met Irina's piercing gaze. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's the company, Nexus, the staff, everything. He's been reckless." Irina nodded, flipping through the pages, screenshots, logs, the damning IP trace. "We'll dig deep." No stone unturned. Words spread like wildfire through the office. Staff whispered in huddles by the coffee machine, eyes darting to Enzo's empty corner office. He arrived late at 9:47, tie askew, feigning nonchalance as he tossed his jacket over a chair. "This is overkill," he told Matteo in the hall, loud enough for Laurel to hear from her desk. "She's paranoid, making mountains out of molehills." "Then explain the logs," Matteo snapped, his voice cutting through the hum of printers and keyboards. "Explain the code, the emails." Enzo's mouth opened, then shut, and he stormed off, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. By lunch, Irina called Laurel into the audit room, the air thick with the scent of coffee and ink. "We've got matches," she said, pointing to a screen. Carla's login, Enzo's IP, all tied to altered files, fake emails, even that prototype tweak. "It's deliberate, coordinated." Laurel's chest tightened, a mix of vindication and dread. "What's next?" "Matteo decides," Irina replied, her tone clipped but not unkind. "But this is damning. Financial risk, legal exposure." He'd be mad to ignore it. That evening, Enzo cornered her by the elevators, his breath hot with coffee and rage. "You're ruining me," he hissed, eyes wild, pupils dilated like he hadn't slept. "Back off, Laurel, or I'll—" "You'll what?" she cut in, stepping closer, voice low and lethal. "You ruined yourself, Nexus, your dad's trust, all of it. Threaten me again and I'll bury you deeper." His glare burned into her, but he backed off, muttering curses as the elevator doors slid shut. Laurel exhaled, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her bag. She'd rattled him, but he was unpredictable now, a loose cannon with nothing to lose. The next day, the audit widened its scope. Past projects, missing funds, discrepancies stretching back months, all linked to Enzo's brief tenure. Laurel stayed late, her desk lamp casting long shadows as she reviewed Nexus's final launch prep. The office was quiet, save for the hum of the HVAC, but she felt the storm brewing. Matteo's faith in his son was crumbling, brick by brick, and she'd lit the fuse that started it. She glanced at her notebook, dates, times, every move catalogued. If Enzo struck again, she'd be ready. This wasn't just her fight anymore, it was the company's survival. Matteo called an emergency meeting at 4 p.m., executives only, no staff, no excuses. Laurel sat across the polished oak table from Enzo, her evidence folder tucked under her arm like a shield. His face was a mask of defiance, jaw set, but his fingers tapped nervously on the table. Matteo stood at the head, his broad shoulders slumped with exhaustion, while Irina and two VPs flanked him, their expressions grim. The air was thick, electric with unspoken accusations. Irina presented the findings, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Falsified emails sent from shared terminals, tampered Nexus code set to crash on launch, $50,000 siphoned from the project budget, all traced to Enzo's IP and login patterns. She clicked through slides, screenshots, logs, timestamps, each one a nail in his coffin. This wasn't accidental. It was sabotage. Enzo laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. "This is a setup. Laurel's framing me. She's bitter, desperate to look good." "Enough!" Matteo roared, slamming the audit report down, the thud echoing off the glass walls. "You've lied, cheated, risked everything I built. For what? Ego? Spite?" His voice cracked, a father's pain bleeding through the CEO's fury. Enzo faltered, his bravado flickering. "I was fixing things, streamlining, like I said. By firing Laurel?" Matteo shot back, leaning forward, his hands gripping the table. "By sabotaging Nexus, our biggest launch in a decade? You didn't fix, you broke." Laurel spoke, her voice calm but sharp as a scalpel. "You didn't just target me, Enzo. You jeopardized the team, the investors, every client who trusted us. This isn't a game, you gambled with people's livelihoods." Enzo's eyes flashed, his mask slipping. "You're nothing without this company," he spat, leaning across the table. "You think you're some hero? You're a nobody who got lucky." "I'm everything without you," she replied, unflinching, her gaze locking with his. "I built Nexus. You tried to burn it down." Matteo stood, towering over the room. "You're suspended, effective now. Board reviews tomorrow. Get out." Enzo shoved his chair back, the screech piercing the silence. "You're all blind, she's the problem." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Laurel exhaled, her pulse slowing, but victory felt hollow, too much debris still smoldered. Matteo sank into his seat, rubbing his face. "I'm sorry, Laurel. I let this happen, gave him too much rope, and he hung us all." "Fix it," she said, her voice softer but firm. "That's enough for me." That night, she drove home under a bruised purple sky, the city lights blurring past. At 11 p.m., her phone pinged, security footage from the office lot, a hooded figure smashing her car windshield with a brick, then sprinting off. She knew who. Enzo was spiraling, his control gone, his threats turning physical. She called the police, filed a report, and slept with her notebook by her bed. Confrontation had ended one battle, but the war wasn't over. She'd won the room, but Enzo's rage was a loose thread, and she wouldn't let it unravel her. The board convened at 9 a.m., a somber procession filing into the executive suite. Laurel sat near the back, her evidence folder on her lap, her posture straight despite the ache in her shoulders. Matteo stood at the podium, his voice steady but threaded with regret as he laid out the audit's findings. Enzo's sabotage, forged emails, tampered code, the $50,000 drained from Nexus's budget, all backed by irrefutable logs. "He betrayed us," Matteo said, his eyes scanning the room. "Not just Laurel, but every one of you." Enzo, allowed a defense, took the floor, his tie crooked, his charm replaced by a frantic edge. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted, gesturing wildly. "Laurel's out to get me. She faked this to save her own skin. I was protecting the legacy, streamlining, cutting fat." Chairwoman, Elena, a silver-haired veteran with a steel spine, cut him off. "You've damaged that legacy," she said, her voice icy. "Sit down." Votes were cast behind closed doors, a tense 20 minutes of silence. When Elena returned, her verdict was swift. Termination unanimous. Effective immediately. Matteo announced it later to the staff, his tone clipped. "Enzo's out. We move forward, clean slate." A quiet cheer rippled through the cubicles. Sophia flashed Laurel a thumbs up, but Laurel stayed silent, her mind still churning. She'd won, but the cost lingered in the air, heavy as smoke. That afternoon, Matteo called her into his office, closing the door with a soft click. "You've earned more than an apology," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "VP of Product Development, direct report to me." "Take it." Laurel opened it, scanning the terms: authority, equity, a seat at the table. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice low. "I know," he replied, leaning forward. "That's why it's yours. But there's a catch. Help me rebuild the right way. No more blind trust, no more shortcuts." She met his gaze, seeing the weariness etched into his face. The father, not just the CEO. "Deal," she said, adding, "but we fix the culture, transparency, accountability. No one else gets burned." He nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Agreed." She left the office, the folder under her arm, her steps lighter. Enzo's reign was over, his shadow lifted, for now. She glanced at the city skyline through the window, the glass reflecting her own steady eyes. She'd fought for her place, and now she'd shape it. The board's verdict wasn't just a win, it was a foundation, and she'd build on it, brick by careful brick. Weeks later, the office hummed with a new rhythm. Nexus launched to rave reviews, headlines praising Laurel Ricci's leadership in industry blogs. She settled into her VP role, her corner office still bare but for a single plant and a stack of Nexus prototypes. She pushed culture shifts, open forums, clear reporting lines, and staff rallied, calling her the glue behind closed doors. The air felt lighter, the break room alive with laughter again. Then, a text from Enzo pinged her phone at 2 a.m. "You'll regret this." No context, just venom. She ignored it, but unease crept in, a shadow on her victory. She called Victor, a PI friend from her university days, over coffee the next morning. "Track him," she said, sliding him a retainer. "I need to know what he's planning." Victor dug fast. Enzo had vanished from Toronto, rumors placing him in Montreal, crashing on a friend's couch, living off borrowed cash. "He's bitter," Victor reported a week later. Posting rants online, deleted quick. "Watch your back." Matteo confided one night over takeout in his office, the city skyline glittering beyond the glass. "He's my failure," he said, chopsticks idle in his hand. "Pushed him too hard, spoiled him too much, never taught him limits. He chose this, Laurel replied, her voice soft but firm. You gave him chances. He torched them. 3 days later, a brick crashed through her office window at dusk, glass shattering across her desk. No note, but the message was clear. Security cameras caught a hooded figure, male Enzo's build, sprinting off. She upped her security, new locks, a guard for the lot, and filed another police report, her notebook growing thicker with every incident. Enzo could lash out, but he couldn't win, not anymore. She stood in the wreckage, glass crunching under her boots, and called Sophia. He's losing it, she said. This is his endgame. Good, Sophia shot back. Let him sink. Laurel hung up, staring at the jagged hole where the window had been. The aftermath wasn't just about healing, it was about standing firm. She'd rebuilt Nexus, rebuilt trust. Enzo's tantrums wouldn't undo that. She swept the glass herself, the broom's rhythm steadying her. He'd lost everything, his job, his pride, his father's faith. She'd lost a windshield, a night's sleep, but gained a legacy. The scales had tipped, and she wasn't letting them budge. Victor tracked Enzo to Lisbon a month later, living in a cramped flat, scraping by on odd jobs, plotting a smear campaign. He's got a blog, Victor said over the phone, voice dry. Anonymous, but it's him, calling you a corporate parasite, saying Nexus was his idea. He's prepping to drop it wide. Laurel didn't flinch. She preempted him, drafting a statement with Matteo's blessing. I fought for this company when others tried to tear it down. Here's the truth. She released it online, audit snippets, logs, her Nexus timeline, clean, factual, devastating. Public support surged, comments flooded in. Laurel's a badass, Enzo's done. His blog flopped, deleted within hours. He called her that night, voice slurred with cheap wine. You took everything, he yelled, words tumbling over each other. My job, my life, you happy now? You lost it, she said, calm as ice, and hung up. The line went dead and she felt nothing, no pity, no rage, just quiet. Matteo summoned her the next day, his office dim with late afternoon shadows. I'm stepping back, he said, sliding a shared transfer across the desk. Selling you my stake, discount rate. It's yours now, Laurel. Let it. She stared at the papers, her breath catching. Why me? You saved it, he said simply. I trust you. She signed, hands steady, a new era dawning. Enzo faded, broke, alone, his rants ignored. Laurel stood in her office, the repaired window gleaming, and looked out at Toronto's skyline. She'd turned his final blow into her cornerstone. He'd lost everything, and she'd made damn sure he knew it. A year later, Laurel ran the company, profits up 20%, morale soaring. She redesigned the office, glass walls for openness, a break room with real coffee, not the instant sludge Enzo had favored. Staff dubbed her the Phoenix, a nickname she overheard with a quiet smile. Nexus won awards, her name etched on plaques lining her office walls. Matteo visited one spring evening, his hair grayer, his steps slower. You saved it, he said, gazing at the bustling floor. More than I ever did. You built it, she replied. I just held it together. Enzo surfaced online months later. A grainy video from a Lisbon bar, slurring apologies to everyone I let down. She didn't reply, some bridges stayed burned, their ashes scattered. Her new home office overlooked Toronto's skyline, a sleek space with lavender plants on the sill, a nod to her sister's favorite flower. She'd lost a job, a windshield, a piece of peace, but gained a legacy forged in fire. She posted one last update, a photo of the office captioned, "They tried to break me. I built something stronger." Likes poured in, thousands from staff, clients, strangers, but she closed her laptop, stepping onto her balcony. The city glittered below, indifferent to her wars, and she breathed it in. She'd made them regret it, made herself whole. The wind tugged at her hair, and for the first time in years she felt unburdened, her victory not just in the company but in the quiet strength she'd reclaimed.